order. Ron, if you would do the roll.
Sure. Rich Bessemer.
Here.
Sean Kimball. Sarah Stevens Moore. Jeff Solon. Craig Rosenblatt.
Here.
Chris Daddy.
Here.
Megan Rockwell.
Here.
Dennis Ryu.
Here.
Chuck Neff.
Here.
Thank you.
And you got all the other names.
I do.
All right, very good. On that happy note,
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Sarah, any correspondence?
I am just bringing up to make sure I haven't missed anything that was coming at the last minute. I believe it's been a much quieter 2 weeks on my email box.
Well, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing, okay. And public comments, anyone? No one? Okay. Approval of. You get a meeting, they can't say anything. Get the chewy
It's all
kind.
peanut butter.
All right, approval of meeting minutes of July 27, 2023. Do I have a motion? Chris, seconded? By Dennis, any comments? If not, and all those in favor? Unanimous. We have no invoices.
No invoices.
Chairman's report will be very, very quick. We had one working group meeting. It's been very quiet the last week or so. And that meeting focused on having some of the staff members from Norton School discuss the plans and give some input on those plans. Architects will fill you in a little bit more later, I'm sure. More than anything else, they focused really on playgrounds, playscapes, you know, kids going to recess from the cafeteria, you know, a lot of the ins and outs that staff members deal with in the school. Not many discussions about the actual classroom layouts or anything along those lines. And as you'll hear, we've had a couple of meetings in the last day or so, just taking a look at some of the cost estimates, and that's what we're going to be focusing a fair amount on today. Okay. Architects, I'm going to hand it off to you guys. I don't know if you're going to go in quite the order that I had here, but
yeah, I think we want to focus on, so in your packet, we have a lot of historical data regarding meeting minutes from some of the working group meetings, some of the focused district meetings that we've had. And as an independent item, we also have a cost estimate summary, as well as a very colorful, what we would call our value management ideas. So, I think a couple of things just off of the start here. We just wanted to give a summary of where we stood with regards to the square footage of both buildings for North End and Norton. You know, sometimes at the end of schematic design, we have a little bit of work to do to get to what our identified square footage is. There are no real penalties for being under, but sometimes it's a challenge to fit all of the program within an identified gross square footage. So really the summary of this slide shows that we are modestly under on both the North End and the Norton schools. So our programmed square footage for the North End is 115,465. That is a measurement to the outside face of the exterior wall. So as we go through this process, you're going to hear a couple of distinctions. There's gross square footage, which is a measurement if you take around the perimeter of the building on the exterior face of the wall. There's also our grant square footage, which is considered net square footage, that is to the inside face of the exterior wall. Now they're different. As it's calculated for the state, that is lower number. But we're primarily working with these baseline square footages, 115,465 for North End, 96,058 for Norton. As the current schematic design documents are constituted, we are at 112,899 square feet, approximately 2,500 square feet lower than what our identified gross square footage is for North End. On Norton, we're basically right on the mark, 183 square feet below our gross square footage. So the reason why we bring that up is usually when we're gonna get right into the cost estimate, and we're gonna ask our partners, Arcadis and O&G, to kind of fill in some of the the cost estimate process, because what we're representing is what our cost estimator, PAX LLC, had. The data that's in your packet was generated from that cost estimator. The reason why we feel it's important to bring up the gross square footage is, we're gonna be talking about an overage, just to remove any suspense from the cost estimate. And one of the things at the end of schematic design that we typically look at is, did we have any bust in the program? In other words, are we having a tough time getting our overall square footage of the building into where we need to be? Those are usually the low-hanging fruit when we start talking about how we get a project back to budget. What we're telling you now is we're on the square footage. So we think that we have a pretty efficient building layout. So, you know, we don't have a lot of work to do in the sense of trying to figure out how we can get the building in alignment with where we need to be. So, over the past week, we have received cost estimate from our cost estimator. O&G has also developed a cost estimate from their in-house cost estimators. They're each issued to one another. Then we do a comparison of one cost estimate to the other. This Tuesday, we had an all-day cost estimate reconciliation meeting where we had the design team, architects, engineers on the call. We had our cost estimator, and we had O&G's team as well as Arcadis. So the purpose of that is to not necessarily bring the two cost estimates exactly into alignment, but to understand where there may be differences in scopes or dollars per square foot or unit price assumptions. So at the end of the day, we get a reconciliation number from both cost estimators. The tax estimate was reconciled estimate for construction cost was $82,038,052. And O&G's reconciled estimate, was a little bit higher at $83,935,198. So
And I'm sorry, Justin, that was corrected
Okay.
late this afternoon, so what we're passing around now is the updated cost summary.
It's close.
Yeah, very close.
43%.
Yeah. Sorry, Justin.
Okay, no problem.
And these numbers are pre any VE ideas,
Yep,
correct?
these numbers are pre any VE ideas.
So, yeah, this is kind of the normal course of action during the SD process, so no, you know, the numbers are what they are, nobody panics, we're not panicked, I just wanna make sure. There's two ways to look at it. Justin spoke about the square footage. It's not in excess of square footage, we're right where we need to be, so it's in the cost per square foot. So then you gotta dig deeper into, okay, what are the materials, what are the systems, those kinds of things. So that's where we spent a large majority of our time over the last 3 days, really, since the estimate reconciliation. And so that's kind of big picture. And then before we jump into the VM list, there's essentially, these are set up, and for those that aren't familiar with estimates, by the trade division as per the specifications. So there's a whole series, 33 essential series with different subsections that break down everything from temporary controls, site, development, parking, all the way through thermal insulation, roofs, windows, all the way through. So there is a 60-page document from ONG and a 40-page document from our estimator that details quantities, unit costs, all the takeoffs. So there's a lot of work behind, these 2-3 pages of summary, but I thought, we thought collectively, just to keep it high level for this evening, that's where we are. So, sorry to,
No,
I
that's
just
good.
wanted to kind of set the table. There's some, so when you look at the second page of this handout, you'll see direct costs is 64 million. So that is the bids basically received by all the subs together, right? So those numbers are pretty close between ONG and PAX and Tecton, the design team. So some of the variations that you'll see are design and estimating contingency at 7.5%. So the discussion around that topic is, look, you have an estimate set, a schematic design set, you don't have everything detailed, so we're gonna put a little contingency in there because we don't know what all the detail is. The other side of that discussion is that the systems, like mechanical, electrical, plumbing, lighting, all of those systems that we're using for unit cost per square foot are known today's dollars cost per square foot. So we feel collectively that they're very accurate. So that design and estimating contingency is there for that, just that contingency. So there's been a lot of debate and full transparency. We think we can be at 5. The builders think, the CMR thinks they want to be higher. We're very good at sticking to our scope and staying on it, proven by the square footage metrics. We're right on the square footage. So the variations that you'll see in the estimates are not necessarily, we spent the full day talking about how much curtain wall did you have. I had this, you had this, yep, okay, that's good. So there's a lot of agreement through all of the sub-trades. Some of the variations become that contingency, the escalation, and I guess everybody is aware of it over the last 2 years, right? It's just, pick a number, and pick a trade, it varies. So, I think we had another working session earlier this afternoon. I think we agreed to kind of leave that more or less where it is. We think that's, in years past, we carried 4.5%, right, all day long for most of my career up until the last 2 years, and it was just been, what do we do? So,
And this number is lower than what we were talking about 10 months ago, 12 months ago, when estimators were looking at double-digit escalation.
So those two are where some of the variations are, and the reason why I want to spend a little time on that before we go through the VM list is, we'll be aggressive against it, and they've heard our positions on it, because I want to make sure that if we're going to make some hard decisions on what's in and out of the project, I want to make sure we're not carrying too much of these percentages. We have to, our job is to hit the budget, not to be 10 million below or 10 million above. Our job is to give you, the best building you can possibly give you. So that's the conversations that have been going on more recently. And then what we did on this sheet, and I don't, if you want to walk me through each line item, but on this sheet is what I would categorize as basically most of the green is low-hanging fruit, where it does not affect the quality of educational space, the size of the educational space. Some of it doesn't even affect aesthetics. You'll never know. It's just let's use our brain to balance the site kind of thing. And we'll get into the detail in a minute. So there's a lot in the green that is our recommendations to accept. Okay, so without really, I'll call it, I'm using a lot of analogies, but there's not much pain in accepting those green ones. They're relatively benign modifications. Maybe we were a little overzealous with, the landscaping. We had quite a bit of landscaping. We think we can cut that back considerably and still have a wonderful site plan. So those are kind of the conversations that you start shaking out towards the end of schematic design and certainly at the estimating phase. So if you'd like, we can kind of walk you through.
I would
very
like to go
briefly.
through that item by
Okay.
item.
Okay.
What are
So-
the yellow and red? They're obviously less desirable,
Yeah, yellow is
Big
like
one, yeah.
caution.
or, okay, red is don't, yeah.
Red
We
is
don't-
gonna hurt.
Yeah.
Don't get
Those
burned.
ones, sorry.
Yeah, yellow is, we like not to do them, but I think, we should look at it and track it, like, we're gonna get another check at DD, and we're gonna get another check at CD. I think those are very good options to look at as alternates or possible alternates, so that, you know, for example, I'll give you flooring, the first yellow item, B1, to provide linoleum instead of rubber flooring. So there's two different types of flooring materials. That's a pretty, we do this often in our project, that's a pretty easy item to say, give me a price for this one and give me a price for that one, so that during bid, so that you can know the real cost and then you can decide. So the yellows, we think we can develop in some of them, some alternates, so that who knows where we're gonna be in a year and a half. That's where a year and a half from now is really bid date, we're gonna be opening up bid. So we could be where we are today, we could be, you know, it could be quieter out there, it could be busier out there, we don't know. So that's the strategy behind the green, yellow, and red strategy. Red is something that we'd like not to get into it, we don't have to. There's not very many of them, but on this particular project, on this site, there's a couple. Go.
So the one thing that we should also stipulate is that these numbers, the reconciled cost estimates from both tax and ONG include a basis of design for a geothermal well system, okay? We priced the mechanical systems out a couple different ways, and that's actually what MEP-1B is in the yellow, which is option 3, which is in lieu of that, we would provide a natural gas-fired hot water heater. Craig, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Yes.
And boilers.
And boilers in lieu of the water-to-water heat pump water heaters
And geothermal.
and geothermal. So that is in the green recommendations, all of that scope stays in the baseline project.
And one important distinction that we talked about today, so remember, we talked a lot, or Craig did, about the chilled beam. That system is in the base scope, and none of these change the chilled beam. It just changes from geothermal to, like we said, geothermal to natural gas to propane. Okay, so just to be clear, we're
The
not.
numbers that are here are Tecton's numbers.
Correct.
And in a few cases, there's some differences.
Yeah, and we haven't actually gone through the entire list, because we were actually working on it this afternoon with Jeff and Justin. So we are gonna put numbers to each of these items as well, so that there's a comparison to see what each estimator thinks.
And the point that I want to make to the committee, because I know initially we had talked about improving schematic design today, is that obviously these numbers are still being massaged and worked on. We're looking very closely now at what kind of reductions we might want to make, and that it's highly unlikely we will want to move towards approving the schematic design today. We will put that off to the next meeting so that we have a chance to really digest this, and also the list of items that we have that we've raised earlier, which is in your packet, but we've seen it for the first time today. So, you know, this is a work session for us, so we get a feel for what we need to do to make sure that we're not going ahead with a building that then we couldn't afford. Okay, Justin?
Just a
Yeah.
question before we go. Gross square footage to gross square footage, that's great. How are we with the OSCGR square footage?
So I don't know if I put that slide in because, no, we just have the cafeteria analysis that was asked. So I will tell you why we didn't want to put it in, is because we know that the program, the We know that the OSCGNR number was gonna be larger than what your maximum allowable would be.
Right.
But my point in bringing this up, and the reason why we didn't show that number, is because when we had our prep session with Kermit, the discussion was you should investigate a space waiver because of the specialty programs that are already described in your program.
Mhm.
So, in my opinion, I think the effort should be really in that, seeking that, which we can coordinate with Arcadis on to push that along with Kermit. Because if we get that, it takes the variable of the less than 100% reimbursement of your square footage out of the equation. So we can get you those numbers, but I just don't want to alarm folks that, because the state offered up the idea of space waiver. So does that make sense?
Yeah, because in my mind, the number that's missing from the estimate is the net cost to the town.
Yeah, yep. So we can show it, we have the numbers, we can show you what that delta would be, and track it. We'll provide that regardless,
Yeah.
and then once we get, hopefully, an opinion, successful opinion on a waiver, that piece would ideally go away.
Because if we get a waiver, the numbers look better, you look better, you know.
It doesn't really matter, yeah, I mean, I think if they didn't offer it up at the prep
Don't
session.
inflate his ego.
Yeah. No, we won't take that right now, but, so we'll show where we are today.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely critical to start pressing that button and see if we can get that.
Who's doing that?
So we'll coordinate as a team and get it moving. Yep.
Is everybody familiar with the language that Jeff and Dennis were just speaking? So there's a maximum allowable square footage that the state will reimburse on, and that's predicated on the occupant load of the building or the student body multiplied by a square foot per occupant. If you are over that, the percentage that you are over that is the percentage that your reimbursement is reduced. So if you're 20% over your maximum allowable area, you would have a 20% reduction of your reimbursement, which your reimbursement is 50%, it would mean it would be 40. And your baseline information that you had calculated had already factored in some reduction in the square footage. It's like 45.6 or around 46%, I think.
Yeah.
So our goal is to maximize reimbursement and the space waiver is.
So you can still build the building, and you're still working within the amount that was approved at referendum. It's just that in the end, the town would not see as much reimbursement from the state as what they would.
Yeah, ideally, we go after it. There's no reason not to. So
But there will be some non-reimbursable costs.
there'll be ineligible
You
costs
can't
on
hit
this project.
100%.
There's never 100% reimbursement.
Hey, for instance, we talked about if we have to bring a gas line, that's
Absolutely.
off-site, therefore that's not reimbursable.
Yep.
So we know that that sort of thing will come up.
Can you file share the latest schematic design again, or is it on the server somewhere?
I know it's on a Google Share Drive.
Is it ours?
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
okay. But I think it may be the one that we're using within the district, with the working group. Is,
I know I forwarded it to you, I can do.
Yeah, the link's expired,
Yeah.
that's all.
okay.
That's not the same thing.
Okay, because I have it here.
Are there two Google Share Drives?
I think there's one,
There's one I'm on that doesn't have it.
Okay.
Yeah, right, at the end of the day. I know we have the one drive that we use for everything.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's got a lot of material on it.
it does, I mean, it's everything very transparent, I guess, but I think it's on that one.
Yeah, we can move it, or we can copy it to them, and we just need to get access.
I'm not sure we have access to the share drive that the community uses. But if so, all of the material, I mean, we kill a lot of trees every meeting to bring this. So if
Yeah.
there's a place that we can put it all in.
I'd rather have it on there just so pull it up, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be like the full.
Like all the drawings.
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
drawings.
yeah. Okay, that's
Yeah, we have the north end ones.
I sent them out.
Okay, yeah.
I guess all I'm asking, and you can put this in a minute, then, is if we're sending them out, having a link doesn't really matter. I want it on the shared drive where everything else is.
I don't
So we have
control
one
the
spot.
shared drive, so I often just.
You put minutes on the shared drive. I'm looking at minutes that we have, and we
I-
have
I
agendas and everything.
I don't put
on
them
there,
on
so-
Yeah,
Jeff has complete control.
We just
of it.
want everything in one spot, that's all I'm asking.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's fair.
Any other questions before we start going line item by line item? Okay. Go ahead, you wanna do it?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
So the first one, G1, is the design contingency that Jeff had referenced. So, I mean, to understand where, you know, what kind of dollars we're looking at in a reduction from 7.5% design contingency to 5, it's about $1.6 million. Getting into the site items, the very first one, S1, is balance the site contours, including pavement structure, subgrade elevations. So a lot of this is based on our grading plan. We have Ryan from Benesh that's here. If you want to fill in any gaps, I'm going to try and represent your work as best as I can. Whenever we start site development, the goal is to provide a balanced site. And in our current plan, there are some areas where we're providing segmented retaining walls, where we're providing segmented retaining. Sorry, this is an inside joke in the office. Providing segmented retaining walls. There are some areas that we're grading that we think that there's an opportunity to what we call balancing the site. In other words, the amount of excavation that we're doing should be the same as the amount of fill that we're having on the site. So if it's a matter of regrading these areas or potentially other areas on the site to limit the amount of site export or limit the amount of cuts that are on the site, we think that a site of this size, we should be able to accomplish that. So that's a $400,000 value management item. The next series of ones are simply materiality. As Jeff had mentioned, we think that we were a little ambitious in the quantity of landscape seat walls and materiality in some of the areas in the exterior. For instance, we have the amphitheater, we have a number of seating walls that are around the perimeter of the playscapes. We think that there's a better way to tackle these. And so S2, S3, S4 are a reduction in seawalls at the outdoor classroom areas, the lower entry areas, the amphitheater seawalls and retaining walls. We think that we can provide plantings and grading to accomplish the same effect. Item S5, we have bluestone pavers at the patio and outdoor classroom areas where simply providing a stamped concrete will provide us with a six-figure economy. We need to have a discussion, and we think that we can design the connector pieces between the playscapes where we're showing 3 bridges. We think that we can utilize the grading in those areas to create walking paths between them, create the same effect, more or less, between playscapes that the prefabricated bridges accomplish. Where are we? S9, eliminate footing drains. One of the things that we've received from our geotechnical engineer in an additional narrative in the past week is the groundwater elevations on site. We have significantly lower groundwater elevations than we need to account for. So in other words, there is not a geotechnical recommendation to have what's called footing drains, which divert high groundwater elevations around the perimeter of the building. So elimination of the footing drains is something that frankly, if it wasn't on this list, we would choose to do anyway. Item S10, provide standard pond retention in lieu of engineered bioretention soils mix at the playscape area. This is simply Ryan, this is where
It's
they
simply the medium with which we're putting the water through. So it's gonna be more of a empty void space than going through an engineered medium, so to speak.
Yeah. Item S11 is reduce planting allowance by 30%. We frankly have a very nice site that we think that we can capitalize on some of the natural terrain. That's not to say that we're dramatically reducing the amount of trees or shrubs or flowers that we're planting on the site. We're simply going to be a little more targeted than what we have in our basis of design narrative. And item S12 is irrigation system at the sports fields or the green space field. So
Why would we be irrigating turf fields?
They're not turf.
they're not turf.
That's right.
I know it was mentioned.
So we rarely, in these type of elementary school play areas or fields, we rarely provide irrigation. It was something that was provided, we provided for as a basis of design to understand what the costs are, and it seems like a natural get. So that's $183,000.
Hey, Jeff, just a question for you. If fields were put in with the greater vision of it being used by the town for town sports and leagues and stuff, if an irrigation system was desired, would they, or would another entity fund it other than the school?
The town.
The town would fund it? So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be necessarily come out of this budget if it was
So-
for a greater purpose?
Right, so, right, and when the turf was initially put in, that wasn't a school district operations purchase, that was a town purchase, so yeah.
So the town could get down the line and say, because,
They
these
may
are
be
town-owned
wanting-
buildings, say we want to do something with these fields so that they can be used by sports teams or whatever, and we'll upgrade them.
So that's something that could be added in later before it's too late, and we say, well, the money's gonna come from this source, not from the budget.
Yeah, we may want to talk about what would need to be done in terms of having connections and things like that that are already there. And we always have an option on some of these too, to do them as alternates on the bid.
Yeah, the only thing that we just want to add is that though irrigation is commonly an ineligible cost for reimbursement, so that's something that we would certainly want to identify if that's part of the available project.
And that's why I'm saying that might be paid for by the town and not from our budget, if that's what we pull out. So,
Okay.
And yes, you're right, we did have descriptions of alternates for synthetic turf fields, the two of them, in lieu of natural turf, and the our estimator priced it out at 1.1 million to do that. So we have the data, it was asked for, it already priced.
So for this particular item of eliminating the irrigation systems, it may make sense to show maybe a line going out or something, just to get out.
You just have to be careful with that, because nowadays, sometimes the water companies or utilities ask for a separate line from the meter itself, or even a separate meter sometimes. So if this has legs to it as we move through the project, then we'll have to talk about what kind of infrastructure we want to put in place, whether it's we need space for that separate meter, or whether we pipe it. Like the few recent projects that I've had that had irrigation systems, we had to go back in for a separate meter.
We can talk to the utility companies as we've done our due diligence moving forward, just to explore that option with them, just so we understand, so you guys understand the implications of what we're doing.
We'll make sure we follow that.
Does anybody want to park it here to talk about site-related things, or would you like us just to continue to go through as we get into some of the building exterior items?
I have a question on the design contingency. How does ONG feel about 5%?
I think we prefer to carry a little bit more than that, but we did have a discussion today that if we get to the point when we start looking at the DD set and then we start to go over on that estimate, unfortunately Jeff and Justin are gonna have to go back and maybe redraw some sections or parts of the building, but we prefer to carry a little bit more than that. I think we had 7%.
We have 8.5.
8.5.
We have 8.5, yeah.
So, I think we would be okay to drop it, you know, a little bit,
Meet in the middle
little
of
south of that, and, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, Justin?
Okay, getting into building exterior, we received a lot of feedback related to pitch roofs that everyone recognized from our discussion about the exterior and the entrance. The first one, 1A, we have listed in red, which is basically the elimination of the gabled roof sections and to provide a flat roof at those areas. So all the areas that we reviewed in our exterior renderings over the media center, the gymnasium, cafeteria, those would simply be flat roofs. We think that there's an item BE1B, we believe that we can get halfway there by simply changing some of the materiality in the roof material itself. So instead of having a standing seam metal roof and nailboard system, we would maintain the pitch roof areas and put kind of a simulated standing seam metal. I see Dennis shaking his head, but a Sarnafil membrane roofing with applied batten strips. That would be $983,000.
Same life expectancy, same maintenance and everything, as far as the users are
No,
concerned?
so the standing seam is much longer roof, it's a 50-year roof. Membrane roofs will last, typically you get 30 years, 30-year warranty now out of them.
I've never seen one that doesn't bubble.
Membrane roofs?
Yeah, on the slope surface in the back.
Along the slope surface. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, so the delta, the 983, the real cost with the standing seam is obviously the metal, but it's also the subsurface. You have to have that nailer. So it's like, I did it with our estimator today, it was like a $30 to $40 square foot delta. So that adds up to the 983. So that's the difference. That's how you got to that 983. We could explore, you know, I've done, it's a shallow pitch roof, so it probably doesn't want to be a shingle, but it could be kind of a rolled roofing that you can simulate to make it look differently. That could get you 30 years out of, you know, a roof that doesn't require a nailer, and that would be adhered. So we could look at alternatives if yeah, I agree that we talked about this before at the design. We were talking about the design. We didn't really want to go there, but we thought it'd be prudent to list. So, but there are other alternatives, I guess, to the roofing system other than the two that we provided.
Can I ask more of an overall general question on this process? Are you looking for the committee tonight to say, go with this one, but don't go with that one, but go with this one? Or is this something where you're just gonna keep these on here, maybe show us some options, or what's our responsibility?
Your responsibility is to understand what we're telling you tonight, and some of the things that we're going over. All of these figures are one half of the project team, right? The O&G needs to go through and validate some of these. They may, once they go into their laboratory, they may have some additional items. But in discussions with the chair, we think that this is a multi-meeting operation. You know, you have a delta of between $8 and $10 million between the two estimates over your project budget. It's not something that we can drop on the table and 15 minutes later ask you to approve our recommendations. So we think it's responsible of us to go through this, have everyone internalize that. At the next meeting, we'll have better information, reconciled numbers on some of these, And then I think that would be the meeting that we would be looking for some direction.
So, and then just to add to that, similar to like when you asked us about the mechanical systems, what do you recommend? Well, the green is what the design team recommends. So, and again, I'll just reiterate, we think these are, yes, they're changes, and yes, there's kind of variations on the theme that we could look into, Dennis, like different alternatives to roofing. But we selected ones that we feel don't materially affect, again, the quality of the educational environment, the size of the space, those kinds of things. Longevity of the building, timelessness of the building, so.
And a lot of these conversations were taking place at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's been that soon as the numbers are coming in and the discussions are taking place. So we're not ready to push people to make instantaneous decisions. Some of these may be really easy. Some of these, you may really want to think about it and get more information.
It just puts my mind at ease, because I don't know what the expectations are with this, and you know, and I don't know if everybody else is wondering, you know, do we have to vote on BE 1A with flat roofs, you know, who's making a motion, or what are we doing? So
But I do think you
that's-
need to give feedback to the design team. If they've got something on here, then you just look at it and say, I strongly disagree with that. I think it would be important to try to raise that today if possible, so that as we move forward, they know, you know, what should be green, red, yellow, whatever, on this list. So already, I mean, we've obviously raised some questions regarding peaked roofs, and what should be there, so, you know, that's a good piece to know, but it's $980,000 item.
Thank you.
Okay, BE2 is, we had a precast water table that was as part of our standard wall sections. We think that we can provide a flash transition. That's an item that we frankly just think is a detail item that we think will work well with the overall scheme. BE3, we overcooked in our estimation the amount of horizontal sunshade devices. As part of the basis of design, we believe we can be targeted to encumber 50% of that total. That's a $250,000 value management item. Item BE4 is one that ONG, Mark and Laurel can probably attest. We have this conversation on every one of our projects about the distinction between what is curtain wall and what is storefront. There's quite a cost per square foot delta between curtain wall, which is our goal is to provide as much aluminum storefront glazing as we can in lieu of the curtain wall. So that's an item that we think as we go around the building and start looking at the apertures and the amount of glazing is something that we can, it's a natural one that we can do. Moving on to the building interior, item B1-1.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you walked through Brookfield had terrazzo, it was good reception. We got that in at, I guess it was market timing or whatever it may have been, but it was a fraction of what was estimated here per square foot. So we're recommending to take it out and put in the linoleum or some type of resilient flooring that you would typically see in a school. It's durable, it's gonna be long lasting, it's natural, it's a natural material. It's not the linoleum that you're thinking of like in the 50s. It's much different. It's a natural material, very durable, easy to clean. So that's the story as to why it was in there originally, and we're a little bit surprised in the cost per square foot, but if there's only one or two contractors in the state who are busy across the Northeast, then we get it. So, yeah.
So you have like $1,824,000 for providing that instead of the terrazzo, right? But on the, like the detail one, the terrazzo was only 1.7, right?
So
What's the difference?
there was, stairs as well, so they might have been in a different line item. So terrazzo flooring and stairs, because the main stair went up, touched the terrazzo, so we decided to make it all similar to what Brookfield would be, or is. So that's the difference in the numbers, yep.
Because also these numbers have markups, right? They're marked up, they have
So,
the
yeah,
percentages on them
that's-
too, so it's not a pure trade number.
That's a good point. So there's 20%, so these line items,
It's easy to understand,
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
based on the O and G cost estimate, so see the trade subtotal, that total up there? Those numbers are 65 million, that is tying to Tecton's total of these pure numbers, right? These are the trade numbers, the 64,444. But below that, you have all these percentages, right? You have the market, the 3%, the 155 for the fee. All these little percentages add up, so you have to take these numbers and mark them up a little bit. So that's another reason why there's a discrepancy in the not dollar for dollar.
yeah, that is.
This
You
way
still
you
have to
know.
like mark it up a whole lot though, because you're providing something and taking away less.
Yeah, so see how at the bottom it's 10 million under, so you need to do this, which is the marked up value to get back. You follow me?
We have a detailed backup sheet to that summary, but yeah, it's, some of the variation is what Laurel explained, because it's 22-ish% more than the line item that we're looking at. And there was some stairs, and then we had to add back in the difference in material, so yes.
I guess my question is like, the linoleum isn't like super cheap, because that's how it's coming off looking at it.
No,
No,
the terrazzo is extremely expensive.
Yeah,
It's not a cheap
But it
material,
did
is
look
what it
nice.
is.
No, to be honest with you, a large majority of our projects have linoleum, rubber, the terrazzo was atypical of two projects that I've done recently. One state project and one in Brookfield. I don't, there's very few subs out there that did this. So that's might be what described, I don't know, maybe O&G can speak to why it is so high.
Yeah, there's just a very limited pool of contractors that provide the type of flooring system, and it's very labor intensive and expensive.
But last one. Sorry,
So-
I'm done.
so one of the things just to note about flooring is that it is a very easy material to build in alternates for bidding, because you have a finite or very defined area that you're putting your flooring, right? For instance, if I know all of my corridors and public spaces are 25,000 square feet, it's very easy to have, and this is where item BI2 comes in yellow. It's very easy to have that 25,000 square feet either being linoleum or rubber, so that we can provide, and we almost always do this, is provide different flooring stratas, small, medium, or large, or good, better, best, in terms of getting real day bid number feedback. So this is an item where we believe we can, and this was specific to the classroom flooring where our basis of design was rubber flooring. We can achieve an economy, potential economy, by going to a linoleum tile. Now, one of the things about resilient tile, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, is as prices have come down in some of the non-VCT materials, vinyl composition tile, which is what we recognize in, I was looking around for it outside, but it's carpet. It's what we recognize in every school, or every older school. The challenge with that is that it annually needs to be waxed, and you typically need to take your buildings offline for a week at a time. It comes with an expense. Jeff, you probably have a budget line item specific to waxing floors.
Built into our contract,
Yeah. So we typically try and look for materials that do not require waxing, which linoleum tile is one, rubber tile is another. Those basically are cleaned simply with mopping or vacuuming or the little scrubber Zamboni that goes around schools, or would be parked in your school, and it would be part of the nightly, weekly maintenance. So we will always look for that over VCT, but there are stratas that are directly above that, linoleum tile, rubber tile, and then terrazzo way up here. So that is an explanation, probably an over-explanation, as I'm sometimes guilty of BI2. BI3, we also think could be a potential add alternate. Our basis of design had some exposed exposed wood decking, wood plank decking in some of our public spaces like cafeteria, media center, and Main Street corridor. Above, yeah, as part of the exposed ceiling overhead. So we could provide some acoustical decking in that area, and we think that right now it would be tracking at about $176,000 economy. Item BI4, right now our basis of design is described such that the ceramic tile in our toilet rooms is on every wall going from floor to ceiling. And this is almost always a value management recommendation. If we didn't make it, you'd see it on ONG's value management recommendations. So we would focus on the wet walls and for either a very high wainscot or floor to ceiling on the wet walls and a lower wainscot on some of the adjacent walls. And walls that have doors located on them would simply be tile base and painted surface above. Okay, for the structural item, this is one that we have already validated as part of the cost estimate reconciliation. Is simply assuming that the structural framing will weigh 10 pounds per square foot versus 11 pounds per square foot. This is something that our structural engineers weighed in on, and this is kind of, at this point, because we don't have detailed members that we can actually quantify what the weight is, we are going with these baseline assumptions. So that is almost a $500,000 VM item. For the MEPFP, or building systems value management ideas, the first two, MEP1A and MEP1B, are big ticket items, but they are ones that Kohler Roman had provided as part of our schematic design narratives. And Craig, we do have Craig Raza from Kohler Roman here. Craig, I'm gonna butcher this. I've been guilty of describing your systems, but maybe if you just wanna I think it's more or less what we had gone over as part of the previous mechanical systems presentation.
Yeah, so very short, both of these options are still a chill beam delivery within the building with DOAS units. The difference in these options is this eliminates the geothermal well field, provides a boiler and a chiller to provide the heating and cooling media. Difference between 1A and 1B is 1A would have on-site propane storage, versus 1B would be bringing in a new gas line a half a mile down from the street. That's why the savings is different between the two. There's less savings with the natural gas because the cost of bringing the gas service is included. Where propane, you don't have to bring that service, and you'd be paying for rental of tanks on a yearly basis from whoever your propane supplier may be. So that would be a cost you would pay on your gas service. That's the main difference between these two.
Craig, do either of these two options significantly, or noticeably change footprint of space you need inside the building for equipment? In other words, you need twice the mechanical space, or that kind of a thing?
Going with the boiler, you actually need slightly less mechanical space. With the chiller heaters, you need more because of the way the equipment lays out and the additional pumps, etc. Because your chiller's outside now, and your condensing boilers are typically smaller footprint. So that's your spatial savings, and that'll be part of these numbers.
And these are mutually exclusive. So you can have one, but not both.
No, you can't have both, no, it doesn't work that way, that's correct.
Correct.
I already tried.
The other difference I didn't tell you is your energy consumption, your EUI, that we talked about, your EUI with these options will rise. So with the geothermal chill beam, we're running around an EUI of 25. Going back to natural gas and air-cooled chiller, you're gonna be 30 or higher. So you pay a little bit of energy penalty to go to one of these options too over the life of your operations.
Between the two, because we've never really talked about propane at all, between the two, what do you see as the pros and cons?
You get a little less heat out of the propane than you do natural gas, but it's insignificant, heat content between the two. The difference of propane, you're subject to your propane supplier as far as the fluctuations in utilities. You typically pay for, you usually rent your tanks or you can buy them. Nice about natural gas, it's very little disruption. You don't have to worry about somebody coming to your site and delivering it. But you know, between the $600,000-$700,000 premium to bring it take a long time to recoup that cost.
Propane tank is above ground, outside?
You can put it above, if you're renting them, the most likely they'd be above ground, but you can bury them. So you don't, all you see is gonna be a little cap coming up above the ground, so they can go either way.
Well, just as a guess, what would you expect we would need for tank or tanks? Are we looking at a big torpedo? Are we looking at just 2 or 3?
No, they'd be big torpedoes, they would not be small little tanks for this.
So you put an S on the end of that, so.
Torpedoes.
Most likely you'd have two.
I heard that, yeah.
Most likely you'd have two tanks, not just one.
Burying a submarine next to the school.
30,000 gallons?
I didn't size how big they'd be, but maybe not that big, but maybe a combined of the two.
And
Go, sorry.
I know I already said this last time we talked about this, but I'm really happy to see that these are both in yellow and red, because I think it would be a mistake to cut the geothermal energy like first. I think we should try to prioritize the geothermal wells.
One of the things that we talked about this afternoon is when is the drop dead date where a decision would need to be made? And is it possible for us to carry a couple of options forward? Or do we have to get to a point where we need to make a decision?
Craig's prepared for this question.
I think you need to make a decision earlier than later, because it's a lot of work between the carrying two designs. It's not as simple as saying, I can just throw this out and plug and paste this in. It's got electrical impacts, it has generator impacts, it has square foot input, site impacts. So there's a lot that go into changing from one to the other.
So
it's
when you
not
say
as simple.
earlier than later, you're talking as part of this approval in the next couple of weeks?
If we can get this, my guess is if we can get this, yes, because I think if we can value management this building down we have some buffer and we're within budget, I think progressing along with one option is going to be the way to go. But trying to get late in the game and making a change, that's a big effort for everybody to look at. It's not just me, it's site, it's architecture, it's everybody, so it's not a simple alternate. That's just all I'm saying.
But if we said we really want to go with geothermal, we make enough changes in the budget so that we look okay now, and we get into design development and suddenly find out we have a financial problem, what would be our option?
From a design development, so what I would carry at this point, I would do limited design and design development for laying out this particular system, be a couple one lines, and that's it. Then you can make your decision, then it's easy to make the switch. So I would limit the amount of exposure putting on a piece of paper other than a schematic one line that you would price. And then, okay, if everything comes in good, then we can detail out the remainder because we can make a selection. That's the way we'd have to propose. For us to carry through DD a narrative, it's an air-cooled chiller of 300 tons, it's a boiler of X, and you price it that way. It may not give these guys a level of detail, but it's enough to get them close, where the building could be, the building's $2 million over, and I say, okay, I gotta cut my mechanical budget by 3, then it's a simple decision, but without getting into the detail in DD. And then we go into CD with a selection, then we detail it out to CDs. So I think, I'm not putting money, but O&G, I think you can carry costs relatively enough with a single line without having more detail, where everything comes to this point and that part's left out.
Yes.
I think that's how we'd have to do it, in order to make that work.
We were also looking for some reimbursement money out of Eversource. If we no longer went with geothermal, that money disappears, right?
Yes, that's correct. You'll still get some money, but it'll be less,
Okay.
yes.
Substantially less.
Oh, yeah, but your maximum you're gonna get is 400,000 or 500,000 anyway, so you take that down, you may be in the mid twos, threes. Yes, there's a money, you're gonna lose on, your EUI will go up, and then so will your, reduction will go down.
That's if you don't pursue the other credits, which are from higher inflation reduction.
Yeah, when you take out heat pumps, which will have heat pumps, you'll lose that extra credit, because that just goes away, because you don't need heat pumps anymore. And they're giving X amount of dollars per ton, so that goes away. Your EUI reduction or your increase reduces your amount of dollars per square foot. So it's a diminished, you have, both sides you have to look at, but you'll never get to the point that's gonna offset your full geothermal, but you'll get a pretty good amount of money.
The thing that I'm just concerned about, and, mentioned before that, this is something for us to think about, maybe next meeting we vote on some of this. I knew, just because of what I do for a living, to ask certain questions.
Mhm.
What about the stuff that I don't do for a living? I don't know what the implications are of some of these decisions. I mean, how many people in here knew that we might have 2 big torpedoes on site? That to me is part of the decision, that we're gonna see these big giant.
Where do you
things.
see them? Oxford, right? Oxford had the torpedoes on site.
You're missing my point.
But,
You're missing
no,
my point.
I
Okay,
point,
what I'm
yeah.
trying to say is,
Yeah.
what about the person who didn't go to Oxford?
Understood.
What I'm saying is, for all of these things, some of them are straightforward. We have tile that goes all the way up the wall or halfway up the
Mhm.
wall. I think most of us can visualize and conceptualize that, and there's probably not a lot of other collateral things that come with it. Some of these things, like a major decision on this, or the generator that we're gonna approach, and that one, and what are all the other piece parts to that? We just say, yeah, we'll go with this option. Well, what does that mean? What are the other piece parts that go to that we don't,
I understand.
we don't even know to ask?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. You've got a technical background that I don't have.
For some things.
And, right, when it comes to
Not for everyone.
designing a classroom, that's, I'm an educator. That's where, however, we also went out of our way to hire some fantastic people in the design and building trades and to lead us through this process. So at a certain point, I'm gonna have to say, I've asked some questions, I've got a sense of what this looks like. These are recommendations by the specialists. I'm gonna move ahead. We have variety of knowledge base around here. It's up to us to lead it, but, we can't have expertise in everything. We have to rely on the people that we've hired.
Can I share a very short story about this experience? This is how I got kicked out of a jury the first time I went to jury duty. They were explaining everything. I was 18, really excited, and I said, well, how am I gonna know how to interpret the law? And they said, well, the judge will tell you what's relevant. And I said, how can I trust the judge knows what he's doing? And that's when they sent me on my way. But I learned since then that sometimes we do have to just rely on the expertise of others to tell us what we don't know. And I've been doing that a lot in this committee, and so far I think we made some good decisions.
I agree, but nowhere was it mentioned, unless I cut you off, but nowhere was it mentioned as, this is what the real estate, we're gonna need smaller rooms, or the outside of the building, you're gonna see less equipment, but you're also gonna see these propane tanks, and here's all the weeds. We're not getting into the weeds, but we need to make a decision, and then all of a sudden, we're like, I didn't know we were gonna get that.
And there
So,
are going to be times like that.
and I'm trying to avoid them,
Yeah.
because I'm not seeing that level of detail here, I don't know how we do that.
But I know when I built the school that I built in Middlebury, there were a number of instances where I walked around and said, whoa, I didn't realize that was gonna happen. It's a very big, complex facility, 2 of them that we're doing, and you're not going to have all the answers as we go along. You went through in more detail, going through a lot of the specs and the narrative, and you have a technical background that many of us don't have, so I really appreciate it. We've got some responses to some of those things. But to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff, my eyes crossed as I was reading, I had no idea. I'm relying on you, I'm relying on these guys, I'm relying on all these people sitting around the outside.
So I guess what I'm saying then is if I was sick this evening and I didn't come in here, and nobody knew that we were gonna have 2 big torpedoes of propane on here, and then later on we voted for the propane because we needed to get on budget, everybody would be happy that that never came up and would be discussed because we trusted?
We may or may not, but at some point you'd look around and say, oh yeah, we approved propane, there's the tanks.
So
I
we
knew
would-
there'd be tanks.
We'd obviously bring up the fact that, okay, here's the systems, here's the benefits, here's the challenges. Some of the challenges are, you have these pieces of equipment that you need to deal with. Where do we wanna place them? Where's the best place to place them on the site? Away from the children, away from the fields, do we screen them? So with every decision, there's always gonna be some pluses and minuses, benefits and challenges that you're going to have to, regardless if it's on this list or not. So our job as we move through and develop the design is if we think there's relevant decisions that people should be aware of, we're gonna make you aware of. But right now, I don't have every part and piece of each of these options to tell you, but when we make that, every one of these line items is gonna have something good and something that we gotta deal with, you know? It's just, that's the way this process works, and as we move through design development, we'll bring those to your attention, and we'll address, here's an option to deal with each one of these things, you know, so.
We
it's a
still get process. 2 bites at the apple.
Well, one of the bites is next week, is next meeting when they want us to
Well,
vote
that
on
would
this.
be, then we get 3, we come to 1 next week.
I would also just say, there's a reason that we put it in red, in the document that you're looking for. And I would also say that, you know, we need to be able, I say we, because we're all a team here. We need to be able to have the dexterity to take the time that we need to make these decisions. And if there's information that needs to be filled in, to get some comfort level, we'll take that information, we'll provide it at the next meeting. I mean, if there is reticence about accepting any of these things and it needs more information, and if it takes an additional meeting, I'm sorry, I'm putting on my chairman's hat
No,
here.
you're absolutely
Mr.
right, I
Chair.
agree with you so
We need-
far,
we-
otherwise
we-
I'd interrupt you.
We need to make sure that, you know, we're having the appropriate conversations and everybody is comfortable with the decisions that the committee is making. And if that means that it takes an extra meeting, so be it. And we'll work hard in between these meetings to provide the decision-ready information when we're asking for the decisions.
We can set
Tonight,
up-
we're not asking for the
No,
decisions.
we could set up emergency meetings if we need to. The other piece was, we had said, you know, here's our timeline for approving schematic. I asked these gentlemen today, I said, you know, is that timeline flexible? They said, yes, if we need more time, we'll push it. Obviously, there will come a point, if we haven't moved ahead, where it's gonna start impacting when we're gonna be breaking ground. And so, you know, we need to be aware of that too. So, you'll come up with, you know, come up with some questions after you leave here, or today, or we'll hopefully feel pretty comfortable with whatever choices we make here. And there's more here than what we need to cut back on. So there are some items that we may look at and say, even though it's in green, we want to go there.
Okay, the next item, MEP 2, is simply allowing an alternate controls manufacturer and vendor as part of the bid process. We think introducing that competition into the specification will achieve a $250,000 economy. MEP number 3 is elimination of radiant floor heating in the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten rooms. This is a common one that we see. It's frankly one that's been accepted in a lot of other schools. The reason being is commonly now pre-K and K classrooms do not have radiant heating. They're otherwise fully tempered. We can provide area rugs or carpet in area for the students to sit on. It'll be not unlike their their floors at home when they're sitting. And we were joking earlier today, if our kids at the North End school or anything like my kids, they're in shorts all but 5 days of the year. And I'm constantly wondering why they're not freezing. So the reason why that's an important item for discussion is that it's in your educational specifications. But it also comes with a $426,000 price tag. The items MEP4 and MEP5 are kind of tied together, and Chris, in some of your comments questions that you had provided about a gaseous system in the Tel data rooms and a pre-action system, those are questions that we also have. We've frankly never designed an elementary school that had a gaseous fire suppression system. However, as part of the educational specifications, we commonly see it in data centers and not schools where we have IDF closets and most of the server files cloud-based or remote. So in the event this is simply, we think the intent of the educational specifications are to prevent damage to data in the IDF closets. So we think going to a conventional system is a potential economy to the project.
And I can honestly say, even the last 2 high schools we've done, this was taken early on and wet systems were put in. It's just been, it's been a common norm in most schools we've been doing, to not put in this level of protection.
And being that these are green, I'm assuming that means you guys feel
Recommend
that it's,
taking
They
but
should be
it's
bright
also, it's also,
Should be blinking.
it's an acceptable deviation from the ed specs.
Yeah, we haven't seen it in any of our schools, so it's just not something that we would recommend.
You know,
That feeling is you agree?
oh, I've asked about it.
Yeah.
That multiple times.
Look, I mean, a lot of these, I think, we need to make sure, you know, we can be candid about these type of items, but first and foremost, we want to make sure that all of these decisions also align with district standards, and we don't put Jeff and his team at a disadvantage with some of the decisions that we make. So we want to make sure that those, you know, when we make those, we're unaware of any gaseous system that is in other IDF rooms or IDF closets. So I think this is move along.
Now, one of the things Dr. Sullivan and I mentioned at the meeting today is we wanted to start with the idea that changes and reductions should be made as far away from the kids in the educational program as possible. We didn't want to suddenly be shrinking classrooms, changing the media center, doing things along those lines. We think we've designed a nice building. Let's see if we can find the money that we need elsewhere, where most of these child walking in the building would not say, this is poorly designed.
Could I ask a question about the radiant flooring? So does that mean it would still be hard surface floor, not carpet or anything, but not heated either?
I raised that question today. I thought that,
Great question.
yeah, I thought the specs called for carpeting,
So,
but they don't.
no, I pulled it up, so it calls for VET, vinyl enhanced tile with area rugs. So
Okay.
what we discovered and confirmed, and ONG might have a slightly different opinion, but the cost between the carpets and the cost between some of the flooring, resilient flooring are pretty close in that it really should be a discussion during DD to see what's best for the school system, what's most appropriate, long life, functional. So I'm not quite sure. So that's yet to unfold, I guess, and will unfold
That
in
makes
the
sense.
DD phase.
So it's not a value management or value engineering decision between carpet and resilient tile. What is though is radiant floor.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
That makes total sense. Thank you.
Item number MEP-6 is simply, so as has been noted earlier, The generator that is part of the basis of design is a 1 megawatt generator. And that is predicated on the assumption that this school would be serving as a warming center to the north end of town and providing additional backup power in some of the areas like cafeteria, lighting, power, heating and cooling, correct? Greg,
Correct.
I'm looking down to you. So that was what we heard in some of our initial discussions about programming and what this building wants to be. We can build this as an alternate to, rather than a 1 megawatt generator, go to a 450 kilowatt generator and simply provide life safety protection, keep the building from freezing, and provide emergency power to our data rooms, etc. So going from 1,000 kW to 450 kW is an approximate savings of 190,000. Now, Chris, I know you had a number of questions in your written.
I think my biggest question right now, to streamline all of this and save everybody's time, do you mind if either you and I or you and your electrical engineer have an offline conversation where I could ask these questions, we could speak shop, and then when it comes time for us discussing as a committee, I can translate rather than it being outside in a written that sort of answers a question but creates another. I mean, this is probably the only thing on this whole project that I'm really feel comfortable with, you know,
Yeah,
it's
no
in my
problem.
wheelhouse. And then, because yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I think 10 minutes on the phone, it's answered. You know,
Yeah, we
more
can
than that for me to type more questions.
We can show you the loads and how the loads are that were used to generate this size. You know, that were put in the Cummings program and everything, so, well, yeah, that could be easily achieved.
I'd like to do, you know, like I say, it'd
Yep.
be a 10, 15-minute conversation at best. We'll all understand each other, and then, you know, I could act as sort of a translator.
Yeah, we can summarize it and
If
just
you don't
kind of
mind.
do a synopsis. No, it's fine.
Where did the idea that this was going to be a warming center come from? It's not in the specs, is it?
No, it's not in the specifications.
I think it was born from some of the working group conversation, I think.
I thought this came out of our district meeting.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you know?
I was trying to think about that, as Craig just said, out of our district meeting. Trying to think of like, oh, you know, when we had perhaps the meeting including the community emergency services and security folks.
It was the meeting, I recall it as a meeting with the fire and life safety.
Yeah, that
police.
might be a, you know, a wish. I mean, I can guarantee you if we had a meeting with the town park and rec folks too, that they would probably say, let's irrigate that field. But the, you know, at the north end, I think there is, I could make a much better argument for warming center, given that there's a counterpart at Cheshire High on more on the south end of town. I think it's good to diversify those things from a community perspective, but that's not my call, and I'm not paid to make those arguments. You know? If it means we have to modify the building and it's not the ed specs that the town approved, I would, if we think we should be doing that from a town perspective, I would think we should be going back to the town to say, you know, here's the add-on, if you wanna make this a warming center, do you think it makes sense to invest that money? Rather than say, you know, it wasn't included in the original plan that you had, but we're gonna add it because we're just nice people. You know, it's just my 2 cents.
Yep.
So the distinction between warming center and emergency shelter is very important because we typically will call these types of facilities warming centers because once you start to designate them as emergency shelters, they have certain FEMA requirements, they're more structural,
All right.
structurally.
What about reimbursement too, Justin?
It's an interesting question whether or not there would be any. I'm not-
It would have to be, so if we proceed in this fashion, we'd have to put that in the revised ed spec is what I think we'd have to make sure that.
Yeah,
it's
for reimbursement's sake, yeah, makes sense.
Can the upsize of the emergency generator be treated as an add alternate, or no, it affects too many sizes of panels and? is that something-
Yeah, it's transfer switches, all like, it's a little more tricky.
It's,
But it depends how we set up the distribution, maybe it could.
And what's the cost delta too, like
Well, right now, it's a $1.90 is what we're saying.
190 grand?
Yeah.
Alright.
That's what I'm saying, it's, I mean, at the end of the day, we're a town committee. So
Right,
we should go to the
for
town with a
190
recommendation, it's 190,000, I think there's 190,000 other things we can get rid of on here.
Hmm.
Versus a warming center that the whole
Mhm.
town could benefit from,
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
need a warming center.
If it was 1.9, we'd be having a different conversation, I think,
Yeah.
but for 190 grand.
So
Stripping
just,
down the tiles is gonna, half of it.
and just for the record, I submitted meeting minutes from our meeting at 6:21. That came on when we had a meeting with Vincent, Richard Clavitt, and the district group facilities. That's where that was introduced to the product, and then it was talked about, getting with the town officials to discuss it further, but that's where that idea came from. And those meeting minutes were submitted, I think second night I came here, for record.
Right, yeah, and I think that the idea was just to get the numbers so that
Yes,
everybody knew
correct.
that's what this is.
and that 190 is just the delta between the two generators, right?
Basically, yes.
Not the delta with the reduction of all the distribution equipment, right?
It may not cover that, no.
So you're probably more like, I'd say that's almost 2, you're probably at 350 by the time you're all done, or more.
Tanks.
Well, I think there's also more to it when you keep a warming center, because now you're planning to occupy a building when you're on generator. So now you need some other systems that are actually backups, because you no longer have a backup system when you're occupied on generator.
Yeah, and that's what the size differential covers, to make sure all those systems are accounted for.
Can I ask what might be a silly question? If it can function as a warming center on generators, that mean it could also function as a cooling center, which might be more useful given the trajectory of our temperatures?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
With the option, we have geothermal, that's very simple. If we go with the air-cooled chiller, if we end up value engineering down and get rid of geothermal, it's a little trickier because the chiller would be much bigger to be able to handle. Right now, we have the chance of diversity to step down how much cooling, we can knock it down. But the chiller may not have so much function, so it could play around a little bit with the numbers.
Okay, so as we had mentioned, just as a summary, the items that are identified in green recommend aggregate to approximately $8.5 million off of the PAC's baseline estimate, which ends up, once applied, ends up more or less putting the project on budget. The items in yellow, if you add those to the items in green, it ends up being a $4.3 million under budget. But if you add in the items in red, which means most importantly, simply substituting MAP 1B for MAP 1A, it ends up further reducing the overall project budget.
Yeah, that number might need to be revised depending on, or will be, depending on the roof options, just because I don't think it's fully reflected in both of those.
So, as we had mentioned at the top, and I think tried to caveat as much as we could, that this all needs to be validated from ONG. There may be additional items that we have not considered that the construction team will bring to the table. But we anticipate between now and the next meeting, all of these will get buttoned a little bit tighter so that we can ultimately further this discussion at the next meeting.
Comments or questions?
I had a question on the design contingency, so they're saying, ONG saying like 8.5%, right? You got 5%. Like, when does that start to kind of dwindle down? Like, when can we start to eat into that, say, oh yeah, you know what, we want this type of flooring and everything you go back to? Like, when do you start taking away from it?
We're gonna have the same discussion at design development.
We're doing three estimates.
Right, so at each estimate, that percentage drops.
It just
Technically,
keeps
it just,
Get us back.
it rolls up into the trade cost.
Yeah.
So we're picking up more things and more things are getting added to the actual trade costs.
Yeah, so you'll notice the trade costs will be increasing as we go, but those contingencies
Contingencies.
reduce. And so does escalation, because we're getting closer to the bid date. So those two numbers will continue to decrease all the way to the last estimate. It'll
And
be
just to
zero.
reiterate our position is that their trade costs that are in the detail of the current SD estimate are based on costs that are out there today. Defined costs for defined projects. That's why
For the lines that are on the drawings that exist today.
he called, we know a chill beam system, Laurel, just bid, right? You bid it, you know what it costs. So I'm just, yes, I'm being, the last few projects outside of COVID, I felt like we could have been stronger with making sure that we're very good at staying on scope, but I wanna make sure that we're getting the best value for the client. And so I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to be accurate, that's all.
Chuck, the reason why you have a design estimating contingency at 8 or 7% is because there's not a lot of detail in schematic design. As you go to the design development, more detail, and then as you get to the construction documents, all the detail, right? Because at that point, the documents are complete. And I think what Jeff and Justin are saying is there is some detail in the schematic design right now. The mechanical systems and that type of thing. So therefore, you don't apply the entire 8.5 or 7.5% to the entire estimate. You maybe do it on things that aren't detailed, and that's why he's arguing for a smaller design contingency than kind of a wholesale 8.5 or 7.5%.
Dennis, you
Yeah, are you looking for an opinion?
Sure.
Some guidance?
Yes, exactly.
Don't mess with the roof. Particularly on the front elevation,
Don't mess with it?
because that will basically take away the premise that what this building is supposed to look like. I've never seen a farm with a flat roof. In the back of the building where the classroom windows are, you can play with it.
One comment that was made when we were talking today, we have 3 peaked roofs.
Yep.
Is it possible to save money to go with a single peaked roof, for instance, over the gym?
Yeah, it depends on the aesthetics.
With flat roofs? Yeah, I mean, could you give that sense of that barn look? Because the gym had the big peaked roof and then flat roof on either side. I mean, if that saved a fair amount of money.
Maybe,
Okay.
it depends.
Okay, I mean, that was, mentioned today as, one thing to think about. But, I mean, I love the plan as it is. I would hate to change the outside of the building. I think the last pictures that we saw last meeting, I just thought were fantastic.
But,
Very proud of
like
that
you
stuff.
talked about earlier, the program in my mind is 1, right? But 1A is an aesthetic,
Right.
the sense you get when you arrive. Things after that, I think there's diminished value for our inhabitants of the building and our areas. From where I sit, my own perspective, feel like we could compromise those things a little bit more than, we put that high priority, the premium on the program and then the aesthetic. And I agree with you, Dennis, that, the aesthetic that exists for not just our kids, but everybody in the community with those roofs are something that would be harder for me to give up unless, to your point, also, it was like, $5 million savings. All right, well.
And it's not just the exterior. When you walk into that cafeteria
Exterior and
and you've got
interior
that big
aesthetic.
high roof,
Yeah.
When you walk into the media center and you've got
The
that
feeling you
area,
get when you
um,
enter that building.
yeah, it will be dramatic.
Yeah.
And, you know, it will give, and the gym also, obviously. So I think those are integral to what makes this a very special school. But I'm just saying, if you could make it a little less special, then we might have to, you know, but that's just one idea.
I don't think we're gonna be happy with DE 1B.
What is it? Oh, the roofing, sir?
Yeah.
Membrane roof. Yeah, it doesn't sound that way.
But one thing you might consider is shingles.
Yeah, we need to spend some more time thinking about alternative roofing materials. I think there's an answer in there somewhere. I don't know what it is yet. I had some pretty good success with like the old school rolled roof, making on a large scale roof like that. It actually aesthetically came out pretty nice. I want to revisit that. That was years ago, so.
There had been some discussion previously, we haven't gotten into it as a committee to make a decision, but about possibly adding solar photovoltaic system.
Yeah. The entrance
And,
way.
you know, that's what going down this exercise, and this is part of it, right, goes all over, you always gotta reevaluate, look at it. But the farther we get down, the more difficult it's gonna be to add something in, because you're already trying to pull things back, you know? If we didn't have those sports fields in there, we would be over by, I don't know, like 8 million, there's no way we would be able to put sports fields in, so the longer we get down the road, the more difficult it is to put something in there. Is there any way to throw a number at it, or to get an idea what it would be if we were to go with the solar photovoltaic
So
system?
we can price it, but I think we would,
Just as a
correct me if
second
I'm
line item?
wrong, we probably need to know what EUI, what
Delivery method.
what delivery method, mechanical systems we have in order to properly size the PV array. So we can, I think, is that true? Greg?
Yes and no, because we can look at what, based on our design, see what roof is available, see what we can physically fit. We have a target goal of around 25, and if it can fit, we know we can work from there. If we switch to another fuel source, we can say, well, if we can't fit it, we can't fit it. We can come up with an idea what we can fit and work backwards,
Okay.
and tell you what you possibly can achieve. We have pretty good pricing for PVs, order of magnitude, just to throw out there. It can also be carried as a, I'm going to say this, as a potential alternate too, because it's an easy one to just not put in the job.
But we always, in all of our more recent, or all of our projects, put in PV ready, you know, making sure
Yes.
that the infrastructure's
Mhm.
there,
Yep.
the panels are open enough to accept
Yep.
that service, so. Because you could also look at a PPA, I don't know what this town has for, if any, do you have any PV arrays?
They're pretty well concealed if we did.
Yeah, I mean, some communities have gone, like, Simsbury, I think, is all PPA, there's some, Norwalk's doing that, so companies will come in and design it and put it on a roof, and, yeah, it's a different cost model, but anyways, we can look at it
Mhm.
and explore it, yep.
Yeah, I think the pricing would be assuming that the town is purchasing your own system. I
Because you're
think-
already gonna make it ready, you're already gonna have the pipes going up there, it's already in the design to have it, the gear sized for it. So the next step is either whether we do it or leave it to the possibilities of whoever.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder if the town hasn't already engaged in a company with a PPA. Because typically when those companies come in, they wanna have access to more buildings. So everybody understands what that is. It's a third party that will pay for all of the infrastructure that goes on your roofs or on your land. And in return, they will sell the power to you at a presumed negotiated rate that is then, that there is more control over. So from there, from the company's perspective, they have access to all of the incentive money, but they also then have a revenue stream by selling it back. After 30 years or whatever that duration, all of the panels get turned over to the town, so that's part of the agreement.
The town has done some projects, and they've covered the entire parking lot of the police station, but I don't know what arrangement or how the structure would work.
I guess all I was trying to get at was not to say, let's have a discussion on PV, just say there are items, that's one. Anything that we add is gonna be much more difficult to squeeze in since we're already over. And the goal was always to get on budget with what we had, and anything that's not there is much more difficult to get in. So PV as an example, anything else, we really need to discuss it sooner than later, so if we get in the process now, and we can start making those decisions.
All right, so I'm gonna move us along. If you have questions or comments, please forward those to me, and I'll put those together and send them out to the architects. Meanwhile, over the next 2 weeks, we'll work as a team to go through, clean some of this up, get some agreements, and hopefully we'll come into the next meeting with a set of reductions that we can make and be prepared to vote to approve the schematic design for the north end. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. You want to talk about Norton for a bit?
Sure. I'll move out of here.
Ernest, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, this slides.
Third, oh, sorry, let me,
Okay, just, sorry, Ernest, I'm gonna get in here for a little bit. So, just a couple things to recap. There was a question about capacity of the cafeterias and how we had either aligned or not aligned with what the educational specifications and also the state standards. So a couple of things. North End Elementary School and Norton Elementary School, the educational specifications assumed 2,800 square feet. If we actually, that's based on 5 lunch waves, which is how that number was calculated. The state standard assumes 3 lunch waves and then it starts to arrive at the cost per square feet based on your student population divided by 3 lunch waves times 17.5 square feet per student. So if you look at the state standard, we would be, 1,800 square feet above what our program is. We're about 1,000 square feet above our program for Norton. The important thing for us is to make sure that we have the amount of seating to accommodate 3 lunch waves. So in both North End Elementary School, and I know it was not intentional that we put this microscopic on the screen, but you'll see that we've made some modifications to the seating layout. We can start to validate this as we move through design development, but the big thing is we're able to accommodate 224 seats in the cafeteria. So that more or less accommodates 3 lunch waves. We're assuming that our early childhood program does not go to the cafeteria, they eat in their classrooms. So more or less, we're looking at a 650 student, 650 students at each building that would be utilizing the cafeteria. So we're accommodating slightly less, or more than that, about 675 total meal seats. But we're accomplishing this in slightly below the state standard per square footage. This may be a little bit skewed because it assumes the additional 110 square feet, but we are above the program square footage in our proposed plans for both buildings, but we are below the state standard. So we'll make sure that as we continue to work on these floor plans, we show you the appropriate seating areas and clearances between tables, et cetera.
So the north end, I see that hallway that was there now is incorporated into the cabin.
Well, we're simply, so the important thing that I wanna mention is that where we showed the yellow kind of continuing to go to the area, we're still showing that as a space between the tables and say the edge of the platform. But this 3,865 square feet is the blue area that's in the cafeteria.
Incorporates the whole
Yeah. So it's, yeah, it was a little bit of a sleight of hand showing that as corridor through there when in fact it was simply open from this corridor into the cafeteria.
And realistically, when they set up the tables, they're gonna expand into that space.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So a couple things I just want to get into before we start talking about the overall building appearance. And this is something that we're going to continue to investigate because as we've discussed the schematic plans and the site plan in particular with some of the faculty. If you recall, this is Norton. Our cafeteria is located here. Our academic wings are here. So classroom is proper. So cafeteria, our specials are in this area, and then our learning communities are in both wings of the building. In discussions with the faculty, there was a lot of questions regarding the ability to, from the cafeteria, bring the students out to the playscapes. Okay. There was concern that we would be walking through the learning communities, and there was also discussion about, well, it's an awful long way for kids to travel. It's not that long, to be completely honest, but when you look at it at one end of the building to the other, it does appear like the playscapes are not directly outside of the cafeteria. So what we're starting to look at is maybe perhaps populating some of the age-appropriate playscapes a little bit closer to the cafeteria off of this perimeter area. We think there's an opportunity to provide an outdoor learning area that's there that frankly ends up being a nice area on access from the entrance and kind of brings a little bit more importance to this exit out of the building. There are some other things.
Before you move on,
Yeah.
I heard two different comments in the meeting that we were at, and Jeff was part of that too. But there were some teachers obviously had some concern about walking all the way out there. But there was also one of the people who said, when we bring kids out to recess, we've got kids on the playscape, we've got kids on the blacktop, we've got kids out in the field.
Yep.
So if all we do is take a piece of that, like some of the playscape stuff and put it out by the cafeteria, it's not gonna work. You've got
Correct.
200 and something kids in a lunch wave, and you can't just bring them all out there. I mean, they need space to spread out. So unless you're able to take that whole unit on the right-hand side and move it up behind, it's not gonna be workable, I don't think.
So one of the things that I think, and you know, this is the first time you're seeing this, Jeff.
It's not, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
Wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Well, I think what we're trying to get at is, you know, maybe instead of everything being balanced directly to the east of the site, is maybe this corner ends up housing some of that, where the point of control or the point of administrative supervision is maybe here rather than here, but it's a long-winded way of saying we're trying to address that concern, but we feel like we have also addressed it with some of our modest changes on the interior layout, and we had alluded to that as part of a.
The other thing I would point out too is there will be community events, and you you've got the big field down here, you've got the playscape that's readily available, it's on the side of the building. You move all that behind the building, and it's not gonna be nearly as accessible to the community.
Okay?
Again, Rich, I think what you're suggesting also resolves one of the main issues that I had with the building. Is you're building from the street, basically a boulevard, very formal entrance that takes you to the built environment. I would expect Biltmore at the end of that boulevard.
So in other words, something, maybe, perhaps it's not a playscape, but maybe it's a place, right?
Right, or if we move the play fields where Rich is suggesting, that allows you to move the building to the right, which makes the entrance front and center to the approach. Does that make sense?
No, I wasn't suggesting that we move it, I was saying that I thought that it would be problematic unless you moved everything.
The main entry's here.
I'm sorry?
The main entry to the building is here. Are you suggesting pushing it this way?
Well, the main entry aligns with the bus drop.
That's cafeteria. The main entry, so the idea is, so this is the main entrance, this is the admin.
Right.
So really, this is your main focal point, not that one.
So when you come in with a parent drop,
Yep. Yep, they're dropping along here. Bus could start queuing and dropping along here. They said four to five or six at a time, really. So, and then they could go in there or in here. The reason why we extended the bus over here is oftentimes we'll use like CAF for like staging.
For dismissal.
For dismissal, so that's kind of the mentality there, but I think there's an answer, a blended answer here where, you know, maybe this starts doing more like that, so that you have some public stuff over here for like if you're just visiting off hours and you can access some play. I don't necessarily agree that these should be right off of the classrooms. Like if you had them more towards the ends, it's not gonna be distracted for the students that are sitting in those classrooms. So I think that might get to Rich's point and yours, Dennis, where we can start getting some green space here, because I think at recess, they're either coming or going out here, so this could be green. And then for gym, you know, if there's green wrapped around, they have a lot of choices, you know. So a little more work needs to be done there.
The blue lines up in the corner, that's all wetland, right?
So
Yes.
that's the boundary, that's the setback.
So you do have some space to play with there.
You can do stuff within the setback.
You can have like grass in the setback, you just
Oh,
can't
absolutely.
have.
Is that why you can't
Yeah.
just flip around the main entrance axis so that your gym, move the gym near the fields instead of worrying about the fields wrapping around?
No, because you want your gym next to your parking typically, right?
Yeah.
You want your biggest parking field next to your captain gym because of events and, you know, that's what's more important. I agree with you that there needs to be a field next to the gym somewhere. I think it's on the top side of this plan. You can't flip this, if that's what you're asking, because all of our service utility, delivery, I mean, you can, it just, you would have to tuck it back there. Yeah, no, we looked at it early on, it didn't make a lot of sense, but,
I thought it was too obvious to have not been looked at, but
no,
I could not ask. It seems like we're trying to move the fields around to the gym and it's a problem, so why not just, take the whole thing around, so, no, it's fine.
I mean, the land is there,
Yeah, sure.
it's just not shaded green, you know?
It's fine.
Sorry.
Okay. So just a reminder of the floor plan One of the things that we had mentioned in an attempt to address some of these comments is in the last version of these floor plans that you saw, the media center and the visual arts room was along this wall, and our corridor was here. We think what we did was we flipped the corridor to the side so that it is open to the courtyard, and put the media center and the visual arts room on the demising wall between the gymnasium. There's a little bit of work to do here in making sure that we're aligning some of our entrance vestibules, et cetera, but the goal of this was more or less, if somebody's going from here or here out to the areas to the east, we don't want them going out through the learning communities out this door here. We want to make sure that, for instance, at the main level, grades 1 and 2, if they're directly accessing this area, they're being able to go out to those areas. Similarly, for kindergarten, we want to maintain our fidelity to our learning communities. So, what does that mean for when we're in our public spaces and bring a classroom out, either in the gymnasium, out there, or out here? We just felt it was a more sensitive solution to provide this circulation corridor on the courtyard side. We think it can be a more dynamic, experience. It will allow people classes that may be in the cafeteria to be able to, if they're not going out this door or this door to get to a playscape to the north, they can go out through this door, through the courtyard to those areas.
Sunlight for the media and the art room?
There will be, the visual arts room had always contemplated having borrowed northern light from this glass wall here. We will be relying on borrowed light from the open courtyard side through this corridor into the media center. So organizationally, this is a modification of the floor plan. Frankly, we have a little bit of work to do to clean up some of the lines and everything, but we think that this solves a couple of architectural problems and a couple of circulation problems, or not problems, opportunities.
If you remember walking through Brookfield, we had the art classroom internal, but we were borrowing light through the exterior wall and it was internal. So same
I think
kind of strategy.
Oxford Media Center has also.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
So the upper level floor plan more or less remains the same, but also incorporates this modification.
What is that X to the right of the media center?
It's open to the light.
Oh, okay.
So in that area would be a double height space at the main level, a way to kind of integrate our main floor, Main Street to our upper level floor plan, Main Street. So primarily, I think, Ernest, if you wanted to
Sure.
pick it up from here.
So just the comments to recap, comments from the last iteration, or the first iteration. Breakdown of the classroom wing volume massing, if you recall, and we'll have the images up for you soon. The classrooms along the parent drop-off, there were some comments that maybe massing wise, we could break that down a little bit, which is a great comment. Simplify the entry canopy and make it unique to Norton. It is very similar to North. I feel like what we've done here is a little bit more appropriate for Norton, and maybe we rethink North, but we can get into that discussion. Simplify the exterior expression, use real and natural materials. We will, at all costs, try to use as much of the natural material. We love the warmth of the wood. That as a vertical surface, we want to be sensitive to that. We want the warmth of the palette to express the same kind of warmth as the wood, but obviously with cost and durability, maintenance, we'll explore other things. we first thought of the cement board, we've shown a precedent previously in other think tank meetings with the cement board. I think we could achieve the same with metal panel. It won't have the same texture, but we think we can achieve a nice warm palette, as in the last bullet point with keeping it neutral and calming. And as we move on to DD, we'll have materials that we will present, so you can have a look and feel, and as we develop, we'll have renderings that will represent that palette as well. Keep the contemporary roof line that you'll see in the new iterations, keep the neighborhood feel. Obviously, we want, as we've talked about before, the scale is very important. This being embedded within the neighborhood, we want the scale to feel appropriate with the neighborhood. So just a quick relook at what was presented previously. There were comments about the columns, again, the massing, so how we could break down the massing for this classroom wing. Obviously, there's the natural materials, the removal of some of these details here. And that was meant before to be like a natural wood slats. And then we tried to express the wood. And again, these were intentional to be abstract at a schematic design phase, but you'll see in the next iterations what we've done to modify this. So as you can see, a little bit more of a sharper rendering. We're trying to maintain the wood panels. We changed the stone to a brick. As we move along to DD, we'll explore different typologies of brick, whether we want to use a red brick or a more buff colored brick, something that might bring in more natural stone colors, like a gray or beige or buff. In this rendering, similar to North, it's showing the red brick. The wood, where we could express real natural wood, could be the wood decks at the canopies, underneath the overhangs. And here we're showing an expression of some kind of laminated wood timbers with the overhanging eaves. So really to get those overhanging eaves to really express this idea of the tree house. And I think the feeling is there that it's embedded right into the neighborhood. You could see we've been playing around, we're not there yet, but we're striving for breaking down the elements here. We've introduced a gray kind of board, which could be a metal panel, like a charcoal color, or something that has a more natural patina. We'll explore the materials as we move into design development. This could be the expression of the vertical wood. Now they do make a wood, a metal with a wood look, and we don't want to go that way. We prefer to go natural wood, but if it's your preference, we could explore that more. It's used a lot. It's just in Canada. They use it everywhere. But we want to be authentic.
For maintenance purposes.
Yeah.
Sure. I know that was raised as a question, even in terms of some of the light poles were going to be natural. We don't want to be having to replace siding, 10 years from now.
In the same sense, we want to feel like we're being authentic with the materials and where we use it, where we could use the natural wood, where the look, feel, the texture is authentic. But we also want to capture that warmth. So here's the expression with the brick. And then some of the cladding, and we want to, as we think about metal panels, we want to be cognizant, sensitive to the scale. Some of the metal panels come in 12-inch planks, and we want to make sure that 12 inches doesn't feel too commercial in size. We want it to feel residential in size. So again, going back to the curtain wall here, so we talked about storefront versus curtain wall. So we want to be strategic if we are using curtain wall. We've got the media center right beyond this point. So that is the hierarchy here. That's our main entry. That's our wow moment. And that's definitely we want to express the building as the natural entry point.
I like it a lot more than I liked it when we showed last time.
But it'll still keep developing, and, you know, as we
A little
move
more
along,
time,
we'll have.
yes. I like the brick, I have to say. And I like the roof line on the right, and how that broke up,
Yeah,
that long, what I called a motel last time. I think that, you know, this is, you know, much more in the direction I was looking for.
We had a lot of fun with that comment. We repeated, I believe the term was 1950s motel.
Yes, it was. Sorry, I didn't.
No, that's okay.
Hurt anyone's feelings about it.
The wounds are healing.
I could see driving Route 66 in 1955, and there it was, you know?
I'm sorry, I just have to tell an anecdote. So, my in-laws have done a trip every summer to Wildwood, New Jersey. And I don't know if anybody has been to Wildwood Crest, but they have this thing that's called doo-wop architecture, which is all like 1960s. It looks like the Flintstones. All of the motels and hotels, the Wawa that's there is all like these soaring cantilevers and
New Jersey always known for a classy place.
Right, exactly. Anyway, that's exactly.
Watch out, you're.
And I know you don't see.
I don't know who's here from New Jersey, but.
You're not seeing the whole mass of this, but, you know, our intent is that because this is the front side, that talking about value management, that maybe this is where it's pitched, but the rest of the wings as it moves along is mostly flat, and that we're picking our moments for the curbside appeal. So obviously, we don't want all the classrooms to have this kind of hierarchy of space. We want the democracy of classroom spaces to be all the same, or to be as each of them to have the same kind of equity. But because this is the front side, maybe this is a special wing here, where we're doing something a little bit more special with the roof forms. So don't think we've brought this all the way around to each of the wings. We're trying to be judicious with where we have our movements.
Still a lot of columns in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
overhang.
We'll take out 50%.
If you don't ONG was.
What's decorative and what's needed for structure.
Right.
I think the playfulness of the canopy here, I think in Norton makes a little bit more sense than the agrarian aesthetic that we're looking at for North, and trying to, so. I hope you don't think we're just bringing the same canopy, so we'll look at North at the same time.
Well, that's not too much of
Yeah.
Other comments?
The one thing that still strikes me a little bit is that the classroom wing is still the dominant element, even though you broke up the roof. Mike, I think if I remember the floor plan, right where the roof breaks is a teacher's area.
Turn on the first floor, Dennis?
Either first or second.
It's teacher questions.
Yeah. If,
Oh, where that green.
if that were to be recessed a couple of feet on the elevation, that would really break that long facade. And my concern is that, again, going back to the boulevard approach, that element, because it's flat and very long, becomes the focus of your vision, and you can miss the entrance altogether. I mean, you're gonna find it because of the overhang, but the first thing you're gonna see is that long facade. And that goes to the comment about possibly either moving the building to the right a little bit, or if we at least break up that facade, it might help in the aesthetic.
I mean, really, you are approaching the boulevard through this road here. I don't know if we
Yeah, but that's because you picked the perfect point where no one's ever gonna walk.
But you won't see that wing until you're coming around the bend to the parent trap.
You will see the wing when you drive up.
Sure. But, I mean, the first thing you will see is that entryway. This is where you're approaching, that's,
And then you're asking people to turn right.
yeah. But I mean, that's kind of inevitable, like, I don't think that the hierarchy of that is any more, or any higher than what you're seeing here with the curtain wall.
Hierarchy, you're right, but visual impact, that's the first thing you'll see.
I think, I actually think, it's a pretty good point, if I can just go to this. You know, maybe there's an opportunity for at this joint where there's a little bit of
Yeah.
relief in the elevation, and that
Sure.
may inform where we break those,
Yeah, and I think we could also change the angle on this pitch roof as well.
And you don't need to do that on the first floor, I think you just
Right.
need something.
Yeah. I think we're still exploring that interconnection too. You can see we split the roof here, and I think that's a good start there. But, and I think that's that, teacher planning area.
You didn't see all the pictures, Jeff.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Walk them through if you would, the pictures of
For what it's worth. You shouldn't, you don't have to redo this
Oh, it's
all
only
for
been
my
straight.
benefit.
That's
Yeah,
free,
so you
that's
can
all.
see that's the cafeteria to the left, and
Right?
then the admin wing. So that's the bus drop-off. The Central Boulevard, the classroom wing to the more of the central one. That's it.
What do you think?
In totality, you know, my visceral reaction is I kind of had the other one kind of grew on me a little bit more than this one. But, you know, this is one of those, everybody's all over the place. It's a personal opinion. You know, in the
I don't want to-
lifespan of the Cheshire Public School System, I will be a fly, you know, it's not, it's more of a collaborative decision. You know, I like it, I don't think it's, you know, repulsive or anything like that, you know. I didn't get a, oh no reaction, but.
I don't think it's repulsive, there you go. Right after that.
Yeah, how about that validation? Sorry, Ernest, I did not.
That is a solid.
I was successful today, I designed something.
Well, it's not
I'll get one extra dozen. Thank you.
Yeah, dear diary, my design wasn't repulsive. Yeah, sorry, you know.
Well, we want you to love it, so we're gonna keep.
Yeah, it's not something I like, wow, sweet, that's gorgeous.
You
It's
had
not
your
there.
heart set on Animal Kingdom.
Yeah, I
You
kinda
looked
like
at
the old
other
Animal
one and said,
Kingdom.
"Look just like the
I-
building in Animal Kingdom."
And you know, to your guys' credit, and when I looked at the North End redesign, I was like, that's fantastic. That's like home run. I don't have that same reaction to this, but it's, you know, I would pull up to that building, oh, it's cool, it's cool.
Not quite there yet, huh?
Yeah, in my, just one person's opinion.
I think, coming back to Dennis's point, it's the left-hand side somehow should be more prominent. Where the CAF and the entranceway is. And, I mean, you know, the layout of the building's already done, but, you know, almost, I think, you know, if that were pulled out or something, so that, you know, you're looking at that piece somewhat separate. But, you know, I don't know what you can do there, but I think what Dennis is saying is when you come in, you see this big mass to the right, and you see a lot of this other stuff on the left, but you don't necessarily get the sense that that's the core of the building. But I'll go back to my original comment.
Thanks for clarifying.
What was your original comment? I missed it.
My original comment was that I liked it. So I don't wanna lose that, and I was well beyond its repulsive. It's not repulsive.
It's not terrible, is that what you're saying?
It's all right.
It's
Like
likable.
telling.
All right, anything else on this? So the,
I live in the neighborhood, that's gonna be my daughter's school, and so last time I felt very similar to the way everyone else felt, but then like Jeff said, the previous, the more abstract did grow on me, especially because I drive by St. Thomas Becket Church every day, and you can see that church in that school, like, and they're right across the street from each other, and the roof line and the angles, it's all there. And I missed it during the last meeting, and then driving by, it struck me, because it is, you can see that inspiration there, if that was at all, but it does fit in with the neighborhood, and I
mid-century
do
model.
like how you change that wood and how it like resembles siding, and that you change the angles on that too, because we see that throughout the neighborhood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll start to show you the material,
Yeah.
brick types and stuff like that, and really start to bring this to a consensus as a material palette.
so for our next meeting,
I think we're gonna take put it in the mix, go back to the second time I've used the laboratory reference, but I think we take another pass at this.
okay, and we'll have pricing for Norton next time around. So we can take a look at that now. I think, as we were talking today, a lot of the items that we were talking about for the north end will also carry over, so if we're changing flooring in one, we'll be changing flooring in the other, so some of the cost conversations that we're gonna have on north end should just carry right over.
Yep.
Unless, Norton comes through way under budget.
I think just to level set expectations, I mean, I think we'll have the same conversation for Norton. It's not gonna be any different because the bases of design are not different. It's a smaller site at Norton than North End, but we are demolishing a building as part of that, so it's just, we're gonna have the same conversation. The good thing is that we already have the hard tonight, so it will be familiar territory when we discuss it.
I wanted to bring us back to also for the next meeting, in your packet, in the back, is all of the issues that have been brought up, and the engineers and architects respond. So, I mean, obviously, there's multiple pages here I read through this afternoon. And we're not going to want to go through those today. I think you may find that the large majority of the questions that were brought up are responded to and you're fine with them. But what I would like you to do before we read next time is to come in with, as you read through this, if there are any that you really want to have further conversation on, either let me know ahead of time or you can bring it up at that meeting, so that we make sure that we get the proper response, and if it's an item that we need to carry over, that we get it on Rich's list that we keep it. Is that clear to everyone?
I think there were 2 out of the 78 questions that we did not answer, but I think we have answers in the time between publishing this and the
Yeah, I read through it today, and a large number of them that you were able to respond, and in several cases you were able to say, good catch, we fixed that, or whatever. But there were some items where,
Wouldn't be comfortable.
there's things like, we'd like to put page numbers on, or we'd like, things along those lines. No, there were several where they said, we appreciate that, we've taken care of it, we fixed it.
Yeah, we fixed the typo.
All right, so we all set on that? And then the last piece that we had was, is it in here? Yeah. We did just the meetings that we talked about last time. Jeff, where are we on these right now? The letters that you wrote?
So there's a letter that's been drafted, Cheshire Community voted to build 2 new schools in last fall's referendum. We're excited to share that the Next Generation School Building Committee has made tremendous progress on the design of our 2 schools slated to open in the fall of 2026. This would go, by the way, to every resident in Cheshire, including businesses. The team from Tecton Architect have worked with our community. That should be a has, I think, but anyway. From the Darcy, Chapman, and Norton school communities to draft a design for the new buildings. Once the new school has been constructed, the existing new Norton school has been constructed, the existing building will be demolished and make way for additional site work. The new North End School, until an official name is determined, will be constructed at the corner of Jarvis Street and Marion Road and replace both Darcy and Chapman schools. Those schools will be returned to the town. These new school buildings will be centerpieces of their local community, and as such, it is important that our community, to our committee, to gather community feedback in their design. Please find enclosed the upcoming schedule of various opportunities to engage with the architectural team and provide your feedback about the designs. We encourage you to visit our website to learn more about these projects by selecting either the new elementary schools or school modernization links on the Cheshire Public Schools homepage. The homepage website is www. Additional updates are available on our Facebook page at the Facebook website. All are welcome to attend functions for either or both schools. Signed by me, Rich, and Sean Kimball.
So that'll go out to everyone in the community. We urge you to come to these and see what kind of questions and comments people have, which I think will be very valuable. I think we're going to get a good turnout on it. As I'm talking to people around town, they're really interested to see what's coming.
I appreciate the shout out in the video from the superintendent today.
Yeah.
Okay. Owner's rep and CM at risk, monthly schedule and budget review. I don't think there's too much there. But,
There's not much there. What we will say though is that as it relates to the schedule, we're in the final stage of the schematic design process. We're kind of moving into the design development. There's a lot that's happening right now because we're doing estimating reconciliation and some value engineering processes. These things take time. Until we get these things worked out, you really can't move forward with the design development. I mean, some elements can, but for the most part, we really need to nail down what the costs are before we can move on. So I think this is an important process. We are not off schedule at this point. I just wanted to emphasize that, that we are continuing along the schedule that we put out there. But decisions are gonna need to be made. We can't just, let this linger on. I think that we need to address them as soon as the next possible meeting. If we can maybe schedule some meetings in between, that might be an option.
well, this group met multiple times when we first started up and did a number of special meetings, which we can do. It's a matter of whether your teams have the materials ready for us.
Yeah, there was a lot of information that came out this week, right? The estimate was completed, it was then digested, and then there was a reconciliation that took place. The reconciliation obviously yielded some things about the design that we needed to address, and so, today we had another meeting that we looked at some value management suggestions. Those are gonna take time to digest. I think they have to be walked through with O&G, and Tecton wants to refine those. Once we do that, then I think that we can kind of move forward with the next step, which is to bring it to the committee. If that means doing a special meeting,
I'm not sure if that's something that's in the.
Well, we may, we're meeting on the 24th, and I'm
Which is
gonna
2
be,
weeks.
yeah, I'm gonna be at Martha's Vineyard, so I'm gonna do it by Zoom, and Greg's gonna run that meeting.
Yeah.
But we could very easily set up another meeting on the 31st.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you pointed out that, that it's important that we keep this process moving along, because, if we do go off track, then we then start construction later than we want to. And then, of course, then you're scrambling at the end of that process to make sure that we're getting the job done and the kids into the school for the fall of 2026. So, as much time as we can give the construction manager, I think is really where we want to be. So we want to keep the design on track, and if that means adding some meetings to this committee, then I think we have to give consideration to that.
And you guys need to, let us know, when you're falling behind, we need to pick up the pace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
budget, we haven't really changed anything.
No, budget-wise, we haven't encumbered anything since we accepted the commissioning agent, and that wasn't a big expenditure. So we really haven't.
Where are we with the commissioning, just curious, agent?
I think it's with the.
It was approved by us, it was approved by the
Yeah, I think it's with the
council.
town to. I think it's with the town to get the contract finalized.
Was that approved tonight?
No, that was.
No, that was
Last
approved
town
council
last
meeting.
meeting, last month.
Couple of meetings ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought they were, I knew that they were.
After the town council approves it, I never see it anymore. And at that point, I sometimes will hear it gets kicked over to our attorney, who does the contract with,
We had.
and it can go back and forth, and I am totally unaware of that process.
We had Bill Donald at the kickoff meeting for the.
Eversource.
Yeah, Eversource meeting. He was on vacation, so, I'm sure he was only at that meeting to kind of be there for the kickoff. If he's gonna be the point person, I think we should reach out to him and find out what the status of his contract is, and then we can start to roll him into the.
Because I called him the day after the town council approved it.
Yeah.
And I said that, it was all set.
Yeah.
That he'd be hearing from our town attorney, so. But our town attorney's not here right now, so I don't know exactly what that status is.
We'll find out where things are.
We can check with Sean.
Yeah, he seemed willing to get started regardless of whether or not they had the final contract.
It was a
so.
pretty clean contract, right on budget, so I don't see that there should be any issue.
Yeah. So nothing encumbered lately, so therefore the budget really hasn't changed, and of course, we got our first look at the cost for construction on the North End School. So we're getting a sense for, what's been budgeted versus what we're starting to see as far as the proposed costs. So, now we have a baseline that we can work from and to start to refine that to get the number back down to where the budget is, so.
Okay, selection of hazmat firm. We had two different firms who came to us. You said you had a third that had talked to you.
Yeah, so 3 firms reached out to me. Hygienics was one, Eagle Environmental, and Ty and Bond. And I think you said that it was only Eagle
and
Environmental and
Hygienics
Hygienics that
were two
submitted.
Submitted. And people had a chance to take a look at the proposals. And we have pricing. And I have the slightest idea how to deal with this. We've got a whole bunch of different prices here. I'm looking at my dollars man over there. Here, send this down to Chuck to take a look at.
I mean, first we gotta determine whether they're both qualified, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Before we look at
I
anything.
didn't think we could look at money.
Yeah, we can.
Thought we could,
Well, it's up to 4, we only got 2.
Well, you can select up to 4, but we don't have to select any of them if you want, you can come back out. So
So-
we gotta agree that they're all both qualified, only one's qualified, or either's qualified.
The one thing I found about Hygienics is they didn't, as part of the scope, put in anything for CA. And monitoring during construction. So the numbers that we're gonna get are not apples to apples.
Which one was that?
Hygienics.
Okay.
That's gonna be your largest cost too.
Right. Unless it's not in the scope, but it's in the fee.
Wasn't the RFP adjusted for that? You mentioned that comment
Right.
before, so isn't there an hourly rate for when they go out to the site?
It's, their fee stops at bidding time, or their scope stops at bidding time. It does not include any CA or monitoring of the construction, whereas Eagle Environmental put it in their scope. So this one will be probably a lot higher than this one, I would think.
But yeah, I mean, it would go back to the RFQ, the way it was written. If you asked for it to be included in the scope of services, then they're not including it, then they're not qualified accordingly. So they would just be out, and we'd have to decide if we're okay with just the one.
Rich, you have any idea?
You've got one now that only responded to the full RFQ.
Yeah, unless it's written in the proposal differently, if they didn't include it in their qualities.
Well, I haven't seen the responses, so I don't know what.
Yeah, Hygienics
What was
basically
proposed?
has scope of services, task one, asbestos survey, has 2 lead pre-demolition paint chip sampling. Task 3 is universal waste material survey, DCP building material survey, final building material report, review of Langen phase 1, Langen phase 1, again, additional work, final soil sampling report, hazmat abatement specs, soils management plan, subsurface remediation plan, waste profile generation assistance, construction, design, pre-bid meetings, and contractor walkthroughs. But basically what that says is, at the request of the client, the licensed project designer from Hygienics will provide up to 20 hours for meetings with the design team and building committee, and up to 20 hours to attend pre-bid and post-bid conferences. Address bidder inquiries, prepare initial addenda, review and reconcile bids, and make recommendations on contractor selection. And then, billing and payment. Invoices will be submitted monthly.
So it's got services up to the point that.
Of award.
And it's not in another page or section, no, it says,
Whereas Eagle, and again, not advocating either one, but Eagle goes through pretty much the same scope up front.
Yeah, the monitoring.
Yeah, monitoring construction and.
Right. And they've included 45 days of monitoring services.
How many? 45 days?
45 days.
Yeah. Full-time on site?
I think it's basically depending on the need.
Okay.
Actual duration may be more or less depending on the overall scope of the abatement. And the contract can be adjusted accordingly, utilizing daily unit rates. We do not intend on billing the town for any animal services, even though the RFP requests a lump sum fee.
Yeah. Okay, so Hygienics was non-responsive to the proposal, or to the request for proposal. So you have one qualified.
Yeah, exactly, this one is, so Hygienics is out, it's really if everybody's okay with Eagle being one.
They went through a lot of detail on what specific steps. I was impressed with their proposal.
Which one?
Eagle, I feel comfortable with them.
I've worked with them before, never had an issue.
Yeah, I was gonna say so.
So, should we make a formal motion then
Yeah, I
that?
mean, we have to like vote to,
Hmm?
we have to like vote to accept the,
From
them on the short list.
To accept Eagle as the
Yeah, and then we
one
gotta look at
qualified,
their, we gotta look at their project.
Right.
okay. So we have a motion to accept Eagle as the one qualified proposal that we have in front of us?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
Second. Any further discussion? And all those in favor? Okay. Well,
I'm good, I'm good.
what's the matter?
Have another brownish.
I'm good.
Okay.
I mean, I don't like that, it's just the one.
Yeah,
That's what it
that's-
is.
Well,
No.
we don't have to
Bring it on
approve the
that
one.
mojo.
I understand, that's why I
The one
said.
bid.
Yeah.
I'm a good one bidder.
And I just looked, I took a quick peek at the budget and the price, and it's not gonna be good, but, there's a summary on a third page, total dollar.
Yeah, so, the inspection phase services, I mean, it's broken down, but the estimated total for that's 21,385.
No, 127.
Hang on,
Keep
I'm not,
going.
I'm not there, I said the inspection phase.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
For the design phase services, that part was 28,900. Environmental site investigations broken down, 15,000. There's the abatement monitoring for 45 days, 31,500. There's other estimates in there as far as pre-construction meetings, submittal review, air sample analysis. That all adds up to a total of 3,400. And then you have let me take that back. So the hazardous building material monitoring and construction administration, that's all summed up into one phase. That totals 49,625. And then soil remediation oversight and construction administration, that subtotal is 12,435. So the total for everything in the scope was 127,345.
We had budgeted 75,000.
That was on Northern.
Norton, this should be Norton.
Yeah,
no?
Norton has,
Am I looking, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'm taking it back.
Norton, you have a budget of 155.
Well, let's listen.
All right, that's much
Okay.
better. That's much better.
Get closer to that floor.
It smelled terrazzo.
So I mean, we can make a motion to approve environmental,
Eagle Environmental?
Eagle Environmental for 127,435 to provide the
345.
345 to provide the hazardous material assessment in Norton.
One second.
Motion and seconded, conversation? Discussion? Rich, you have a puzzled look on your face?
No, I'm just,
Okay.
no. And I think that they indicated that they're only gonna bill the town what they actually incur as far as cost goes, so, they're not looking at it as a lump sum, and I don't think that we would wanna manage that as a lump sum either, so, I think that that's fair and reasonable.
Okay. Any other conversation or discussion? And in that case, all those in favor? Okay. Town council has indicated that they would do a quickie meeting next week to try to get approval we were running tight to try to get them into the summer. So I don't know whether that's gonna work or not, but I know, we were hoping that they could get in and do the work before school started.
So who's gonna manage them? Can maybe somebody reach out to me, see if they have time?
You see what?
See if they have time between now, I don't know, when school starts.
29 for students.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we can reject it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Peter's schedule is.
Do you have the other cost proposal? Yeah. Oh, okay. Important upcoming dates, September 7th, there's a presentation to the Board of Ed. We're hoping we'll have some fairly complete drawings at that time, and I assume it's just basically you're going to go through, here's the footprint, here's what the site looks like, here's the exterior, what do you think? September 9th is the Fall Festival, and you guys are going to be there, somebody's going to be there for most of that time. And then September.
It's breaking the thing.
That's right.
It's much bigger this time.
Probably not, yeah.
Fried dough's on me.
What's that?
Fried dough's on me.
Fried Oreos?
Wow.
Whatever you need, bud. Whatever sustains.
Black
No,
is-
we're probably gonna have, Jeff will take the morning shift and then we'll probably have different people.
You ever heard of Blackie's Hot Dogs?
No.
Oh, okay.
But not as good
One
as-
of the premier hot dogs in the state, and they do set up a booth there.
They changed their hot dogs. They don't sell Hummels anymore.
Know the room. Read the room. Just be careful.
And then September 12th, a presentation to the town council,
They make their own.
which would be very similar to what we're doing. The upcoming community meetings I have on here, I'll add them onto future agendas just so that we can keep track of what meetings are coming up, and again, I encourage
Rose
people to
Dairy
do
has
that.
Hummels. Rose Dairy
I'm
has
carrying a
Hummels.
couple of items
Blackies
for
don't
future agendas, project labor agreements, we got a lot on the table right now. That's pushed off until we conclude some of this up, and then we'll have that conversation. And then the Eversource Energize Connecticut program, whether we do it or we have, I forget the woman's name that who did the presentation for us, but it would be good for this committee, again, when we have some time to get a sense of how that program works. And that's it. Anything else that people have? If not, I will accept a motion to adjourn. So moved. You don't want to think about it a bit?
It's my role in this meeting.
Second by Dennis. All right, all those in favor of adjournment?
Yeah.
Opposed? No. Well, thank you, everyone.